From the Pasture by Hired Hand is presented by R3 Hilltop Ranch. Located in Chilton, Texas, R3 Hilltop Ranch has been breeding registered Texas Longhorns since 2006. What began as 3 heifers has grown into our current herd, which you can explore on our website at r3hilltop.com. We're passionate about loud colors, longhorns, and docile temperaments, but it's the easy-keeping, low-maintenance traits of Texas Longhorns that initially attracted us and continue to drive our herd growth. In addition to livestock, we proudly offer certified Longhorn beef products. Visit r3hilltop.com/beef to learn more. Thank you for listening and enjoy exploring our ranch online at r3hilltop.com.
Hi there, I'm Molly.
And I'm Jamie, and this is our From the Pasture with Hired Hand podcast.
For 15 years now, we've been proudly helping breeders promote hundreds of thousands of pedigree livestock with our easy-to-use animal management-driven website software.
And let's not forget about Hired Hand Live, where over $1 million worth of livestock is sold online each year.
We're excited to bring you market trends, sales data, advice from your fellow breeders, and stories from the ranch.
Our software makes managing your website and your animals a breeze, so you can focus on what you love.
So let us handle your digital chores while you tune in to another episode of From the Pasture with Hired Hand. Welcome to this episode of From the Pasture with Hired Hand. Today we're visiting the beautiful pastures of Rocking M Cattle Company in Wallowa, Oregon, home to a growing herd of registered Texas Longhorns, commercial cattle, and a beef operation. Owned by Jeremy McCulloch, this ranch is dedicated to preserving the rich legacy of these remarkable animals, as well as marketing them in as many avenues as possible. I'm your host, Molly Clubb, and I'm excited to take you on yet another journey into the world of Longhorns and the breeders who care for them. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Jeremy. Why don't you start by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. My name's Jeremy McCulloch. We have Rocking M Cattle Company in Northeast Oregon in the Wallowa area. We've been raising Longhorns for, I guess, now 18 years, since 2007, 2008. We have, quite a bit of a unique history in the breed. I've been raising cattle my whole life. My family's been in the industry for several decades, and then we specialized in Longhorns in the 2008 time frame, trying to get into something more specialized that matched our properties better and our long-term goals. So from there, we've grown, and that's kind of who we are and what we do a little bit.
So 17, 18 years, that's kind of a long time in Longhorn in Longhorn breeding.
Yeah.
Let's start with where you started. So talk to us about almost 20 years ago, why Longhorns and where did you get your first few from?
So we had some property that's relatively dry. We were looking for cattle that were a little bit better fit than regular Angus cross commercial bred stuff. We sold about 40 head of our remaining Angus cattle and bought some pretty high quality Longhorn cows. We bought 7 heifers actually, and then 1 bull a year later. We bought them from Dickinson Cattle Company, focused on some multi-trait cattle, some beef to go along with, obviously horn, color, etc. I'm still breeding 3 of those original cows. Right now, I'm looking out my window, and they're going to calve, in the next few weeks. So the longevity was one thing we were looking at, as well as, obviously, property utilization, better on dry forage, and then all the other, wonderful traits everybody knows about Longhorns, with easy calving and all those things. So wanted to specialize, especially at that point in time with where cattle markets were. It's worked out pretty well for us. So we've been able to expand ranches and obviously the herd. And we're remote, but we try to view our remoteness as an opportunity rather than a hindrance, because while we're not very close to anywhere, we're at least 3 hours from anywhere. We also look at it like, well, we might be 6 hours from Portland, but we're also only 5 hours from Missoula and 3 hours from Boise and 3 hours from Spokane, 4 hours from Spokane. But we can centrally locate, and we do a lot of delivery and try to try to really bring everything under one roof that we can. So that was kind of our start and where we've grown to. But yeah, we got our original cows from Dickinson. We picked up a few, obviously, uh, within short times from multiple other breeders, and people selling out, and kind of a typical situation in that regard. But then obviously retained a lot of heifers, so that's kind of our trajectory from the beginning a little bit.
So did you get any grief from your I know you said you're remote, but your neighbors or your family or anything for wanting to raise Longhorns in Oregon, and then, also heading to Ohio to get the first few, I imagine was quite a trip. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we actually picked them up in Colorado Springs. There was a load coming part way, so we only had to go to Colorado Springs. But that was still a jaunt. The family was all in. The whole family's involved. My uncle, my grandmother, my fiance Elizabeth. She's heavily involved. Her family's involved with us. Her mother and stepfather are very involved with the cattle. They have a few cattle of their own as well that they run with ours. So it's become even more of a family thing. But even from the get go, with just my family, and everybody was on board at that point, to make that decision, because 2007, 2008, commercial cattle weren't exactly a thriving enterprise for a lot of different reasons, and it could work, if you had enough size and scope and scale. But at that point, we had 160 acres of dry land, farm ground, and with doing Longhorns, we've been able to grow that to, well, just under, well, counting leases quite a bit more, but we've doubled the ranch size, and what we've doubled it with is actually irrigated, pivoted ground, and it's all contiguous. So it's been a pretty good decision for us. But in terms of the grief, yeah, there was a lot of, I mean, not the family, but neighbors were like, "What the heck are you doing?" It's like, well, how are you going to make money raising roping steers? And I just told them, I said, I'm not going to sell roping steers, and we don't very often. Like, it's just not what we do. We raise our own beef. We have a retail beef line. We have some wholesale agreements in Arizona. We obviously sell our own beef at our markets. We've been a licensed meat seller in Oregon for many years. So that was part of the plan. But the traditional rancher collective didn't, I mean, there wasn't anybody, like, I would say, too harsh. They're just like, I don't see why you're doing this, and how you're going to make this work, but more power to you type of idea. And then as we've had success, they're like, well, hey, how does this work? And some of those people have even bought heifer bulls from us, and different factors, and but certainly in our area there's a positive spin on the breed after the success we've had, which I enjoy. We have some cattle on the main highway here all summer on a leased pasture. They get a lot of really positive attention. And so, yeah, people were like, why are you doing something different? Just like pretty much anything anybody does that's not, safe and normal and the normal routine. I mean, we heard, questions like, how's that going to work? But yeah, no, Colorado Springs is where we went for the first load, and it wasn't too bad. I mean, it was a long day, but day and a half, but to get there and then back, obviously. But we did not have to go all the way to Ohio. That would have been quite the jaunt back in the day. I visited with Daryl Dickinson quite a bit when we got started. Treated me really well. Treated me like a peer, and I want to say I was maybe 20 years old at the time, and that meant a lot. He's obviously a legend in the industry, and has had a ton of success. So I took some advice from him and tried to apply it to not just those cattle, but some of the other ways we've acquired cattle and sourced cattle, and kind of the overall philosophy with cornerstones and value added, multi-trait Longhorns, because everything's important. But yeah, we got questions, but it kind of, after 4 or 5 years, and we were growing at that point, everybody was kind of like, more like, what are you doing? Like, how this is kind of different. They were more curious than critical.
And how many head are you all up to today?
Well, it's kind of a moving target. We're around 450 total head. Some of those are feeder steers. In terms of mother cows, we're sitting just under 200 mother cows, and we've got about I think there's 65 right now, yearling and 2-year-old replacement heifers that are, pretty hard keepers. They're not hard keepers. We're going to keep them. They're in the retention herd. So we like to be between 150 and 200 on the mother cows at all times, just with our space and feed protocols. But you know, opportunities can ebb and swell that a little bit. And yeah, we're not against selling some bred cows, especially once they've produced for us. We do quite a bit of that. We sell a lot of starter herds regionally. Most of those are small, a bull or sometimes no bull with, 1 to, 5 maybe, sometimes more, but usually 1 to 5 females, unrelated, just so people can get started. Usually those people have modest goals. They want to raise a few on a ranchette. They want to raise their own beef. They just want to honestly get their EFU taxes taken care of. I mean, whatever it might be. So yeah, we ship a lot to areas like Bend, Oregon, and the outlying areas of all these metropolitan areas over into Montana as well, because and Wyoming. We have shipped 2 deliveries to Western Wyoming coming as soon as the weather clears. So that's a big part of what we do. And yeah, the beef herd is always a standing herd of obviously weanlings up to about 30 to 32-month-old steers ready to process. And we process typically 5 head a month for USDA processing for our retail products, sometimes 8 head, once in a while 10, just depending on the demand seasonally. And yeah, those will go into everything from our halves and wholes, but we don't do that many halves and wholes. We do a lot of retail beef. We do a lot of ground beef. We have 2 flavors of all beef chorizo. We do multiple flavors of summer sausage and beef pepperoni sticks, as well as retail steaks. So the beef herd is part of that 450. I guess is my emphasis there. But there's herd sires and replacement heifers and a handful of good young bulls to sell as well. So.
Well, I definitely want to get into so much of that. I want to talk about the beef program. I want to talk about, how you market and do, the different areas and everything. But let's start with focusing on the pedigree herd specifically. Talk to me a little bit about how that has grown and changed over the years, and maybe if there's other folks that you've met through that or become a little bit more closely involved with, whether it be through buying, selling. But let's focus on just kind of the history of the pedigree portion of your herd first, and then we'll get into some of those other things.
Oh, for sure. I'm a huge believer in as a I taught ag, FFA, and agriculture for 15 years. I just moved over to being a history teacher because the business is just too much time to do ag and FFA anymore. But I started my career in education doing that for quite a time. And one thing I taught in animal science, regardless of species, is I always told my kids, more in agribusiness as well, I guess, than animal science. I said, when you start any livestock enterprise, whether you're going to AI or have natural service or whatever, you need to find the best, I'm going to say bull in this case, but bull or stallion or ram or whatever you can afford, and then ask for some extra money from a family member you like, because that's 50% of your genetics. And without that, your foundation is going to be, you may get lucky, but more likely your foundation is going to be compromised, because you're going to get what you pay for more often than not, particularly on the male side. And so, yeah, from a pedigree standpoint, I'm pretty particular into the bulls we breed and the bulls we don't breed. There's several breeders we've worked with over the years. I really don't have a negative relationship with any breeders. We enjoy going to the Oregon Trail Sale. Scott does a good job with that. We've bought and sold a lot of cattle that we've got there. I'm not a huge consigner at sales, mostly because we have a pretty healthy demand with our own private treaty. So it's just kind of, we tend to be more active on the buying front, which, is just kind of where it fits for us. But we really enjoy the experience, and the regional and nationwide breeders are all really good people. In terms of, we have a breeder in Arizona named Daniel Thiem we work very closely with, and we will have a couple of lease animals, bulls, and stuff that go back and forth. And that's some of the beef we ship to Arizona. We work with him, definitely. So, but regarding pedigreed cattle, it starts with bulls for me. I mean, we have usually 9 to 12 standing herd sires. We'll rotate some of the young ones after a short window, but I mean, big names. You're going to have, we have a concealed weapon son we use, a gold mine son. Our senior herd sire was named Over the Top. He was a top hand son. He did a phenomenal job. He got some age to him, and he started to test a little lower, so we had to move on from him and last year. But he really did a great job to enhance our herd. We use a really nice homozygous black and white bull named Cornwine that's adds a ton of value to dressing up these red cows, and I think it's important to do that because there's a lot of really good red Longhorn cows that people move on from because they don't have any color. And I'm a firm believer in you got to have all the traits balanced. Those other scores need to be good, and the frame and all the things. We have a Rebel HR son, a Midas Touch son, a Dropbox son. Mr. Blue, he's a pretty fancy bull. He's a Del Charo son. He throws about 50% blue roan calves. Definitely a color value bull, but he's a total package. He's a nice bull. Our most famous bull is Reckon So. We got him from a small breeder that had bought him from Dickinson Cattle Company. They're out of Montana. They only had a handful of cows. They decided they were done with the breed. I had sold them a few mother cows, and then when they wanted to get out of it, they reached out, and so we purchased Reckon So with that entire herd, and he's a phenomenal bull. I mean, he's the best Longhorn bull I've ever been around in my life. He's at almost 11 years old, and he's still 2,300 plus pounds, and he's just a phenomenal animal. So yeah, I say for me it starts with the bulls, and then when you get into the outcrosses and the way you breed these cows, you have to have a menu if you're going to be at a certain size and scope, in my opinion. And there's times where we were in the middle stages where it was like, we really need to have another bull. We really need to have this space for that. But once we got over that period, we were able to start running these more bulls on different ground, and it really helps. Obviously, we AI as well. Couple of the bulls we have were acquired by our own AI. We AI'd 42 head last year. Everything from a little throwback to Triple L Lucky, expecting to Delta Lucky Ace, Cowboy Tough Checks, Hanging Tough. And the list goes on. I mean, there's a lot of other bulls we're using in there as well, but pretty specific. We like a beefier bull. We want our bulls over a ton. We want our bulls over 80, obviously over 80 inches these days, and they really need to project over 90 at maturity. And that's kind of a part of it. But yeah, when I look at the female side of the herd, I look at it a little bit more pragmatically. Coming from a commercial background, I'm a little bit harder. I'm super hard on bulls, right? And I tell people, I'm like, well, there's way too many. They're like, how do you sell so many bulls? And I say, well, we have a beef program and we make a lot of steers so that the bulls we sell are actually supposed to be bulls. It's like, okay, this is a masculine animal. It's going to pass all these tests. It's going to pass a commercial standard, scrotal test and semen test and all the things. And it's going to mature to a good size. And obviously then the horn and the color, all the stars have to align. And then the price, can vary accordingly based on how an animal fits in that grand schema. On the female side, really every fertile heifer should have a pretty good value in any breed you're messing with, in my opinion. I mean, if there's really an issue, I'll just say this, like with any animal, the beauty of our herd is if there's a real issue, whether it's a a small injury, a leg injury or something we really don't like, or obviously a major disposition issue, there's a truck leaving every 30 to 45 days to the USDA facility. And, it's pretty easy to keep the attitude and the culture of the herd within the cattle herd in check. Because, if a fit doesn't fit, that's just part of the business, and I've never regretted anyone I've sent, because it's always for a reason. So that is part of it. It's checks and balances. But the good cows that we want to retain, we look for, I like 1,100 or so pound cows. Some of them are a little bit lighter. We shoot for at least 1,000 pounds at maturity. Obviously, Longhorns are a little bit slower maturing breed. Some of them get a little big, but I'd still tend to rather have that than something that's smaller framed, much less than that. In our experience, in our part of the world, it gets pretty cold. It gets pretty hot in the summer, and we like something that can still travel, but still have just a little bit more girth to it through the winter. And so we run them a little bit bigger than some breeders on the female side. But like I said, I feel like there's a value with every female animal, and a lot of those will, if it's not a fit or if it's a duplicate or it's not going to have enough horn or something, I like to price those appropriately. And if that meets somebody's goals and that's their budget, because for every person coming into this breed with oil money or inherent, trust fund money, and there's no offense to that. That's great. I think money coming into the breed's a good thing, regardless. But for every one of those people you come across, I think there's probably 40 or 50 that are trying to scrape together something to do something. And so there's a place for those females that can be sourced appropriately. That's still a better outcome than butchering heifers in most cases. The commercial world kind of goes the other way. Sometimes they're like, well, we're going to process these heifers because, there's just a different demand. But, being a papered Longhorn cow should hold a certain floor value. And I like to feel, and I do feel, that if we're selling it with a bull that's a good match with it, a good prospect, and or it's a cow that's exposed to a quality herd sire, the calf should be at a minimum an upgrade from what the mother has going on in those targeted traits, and it's a way for people to grow with that price point. And sometimes that price point changes quickly, and people call back and say, "Hey, I really like this cow, but I want an 80-inch cow that's just front pasture." Well, okay, perfect. And when they're ready to commit to those types of breed engagements, I think that's great. So there's a lot. We have a lot of repeat customers, and it's over 50% of our business these days. It used to be all fresh all the time, but as we've grown, it's a lot of people, whatever they kind of need. Often, some of our smaller producers, whatever they need with the breed, or they'll call and we can try to take care of them. That's kind of my general philosophy on the papered side. We're not against bringing in a lot of different female emphases, but I mean, we obviously have our favorites. Like everybody, we love track iron daughters. I like Rio Grande daughters, concealed weapon. I mean, there's a lot of bulls to like out there, and also maternal lines and what they've done. So there's certain ones of our bulls that we kind of collect some independent EPD data. I think it's probably unique for the industry. We monitor our calves and the production of our cows. A little bit of commercial emphasis on some of that. There's always anywhere from 30 to 50 cows for sale, bred or exposed or 3-in-1s. But really, there's a lot of options.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Looking for top quality Longhorns and a taste of true Texas spirit? Look no further than Cantera Cattle Company. Our passion for Longhorns shines at Old Gringo Ranch, where tradition meets excellence. Visit us online at CanteraCattleCompany.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for the latest updates and ranch life fun. Ready to experience it yourself? Schedule your visit by emailing canterracattle@gmail.com. Remember, God is great, Longhorns are good, and life is crazy.
Overwhelmed with your digital chores? Let us lend a hand. From websites and animal management to internet auctions, graphic design, marketing, search engine optimization, and more, Hired Hand Software is your hired hand for all things digital.
Specializing in pedigree, livestock, breeds, and beyond, we handle the tech so you can focus on the animals you love. Visit hiredhandsoftware.com today, where your digital chores just got a whole lot easier.
Do you sometimes feel like you're the only one who doesn't have it all figured out? Rural life can be isolating, but it doesn't have to be.
Welcome to Ag's Most Okayest Farm Girls, the podcast for women who are craving connection, laughter, solidarity, camaraderie, and just overall encouragement in your everyday life and dreams.
Each week, your hosts, Annalise, that's me, and Courtney will cover topics such as farm life, mom life, making money online, side hustles, hobbies, sharing on social media, jobs off the farm, and so much more.
Us rural gals need to stick together, so saddle up for some fun, real, and unsolicited advice and stories from our everyday farm lives.
Grab a drink, we're Ag's Most Okayest Farm Girls, and we're here to help. Listen wherever you find podcasts.
Well, let's continue to stick on the topic of the pedigree herd specifically. And one thing I picked up on that I think our listeners would really like to know more about is you kind of mentioned that you don't have any issues with private treaty sales. You've found a way to get repeat customers, but then you also have folks, reaching out to you. And I think a lot of our listeners are maybe at that stage where they would really like to start making private treaty sales, but aren't quite sure how to get that process going or pick up steam doing that. So why don't you, speak to your experiences, give some advice in that on that topic?
That's a good question. I would say it's probably at least in most cases, in my experience, going to probably start small, because your private treaty sales are going to be typically inherently related to the size of your herd. And when we saw a difference in terms of our number of sales, and when we went from, not to talk numbers, and we went from, say when we were starting, we were probably 3 or 4 years in, we're probably moving 25,000 right in registered sales, and now we're about 225,000. The difference is the menu. The difference is when you get to the size and scope and a niche where you can have those people with private treaty. You can advertise, I guess, to front load it. You can advertise however you want. You can advertise on classifieds. You can, do the reach out in the magazines and all that. There's obviously a little bit of word of mouth, and that grows organically. We sell a lot of cattle actually by selling beef. We sell, lots every summer just from Elizabeth running a market stand weekly and seeing tourists, and people like, what? Really? And it's small, to be fair. There's not a lot of people buying 20 cows that go through the market. We're buying pepperoni, don't get me wrong, but they're like, hey, I want 2 trophy steers. And hey, I want, 5 cows and a bull type of deal. That happens. So the hard part, and there's no easy way to front load it, there's no cheat code, I guess. You got to get to where you can have the inventory that the most people are going to be appealed to. I call it the menu, right? And so that's why we have, we try to have different colors. We try to have different horn sets. We try to have different outcrosses for, obviously with a continual and overarching view of conformation, pedigree, horn, etc., needs to all be value added. But to that customer that's new, especially in this part of the world, I mean, the West Coast and Northeast Oregon, I mean, there's 7,000 people in the county we live in, and our county is not small. But with that said, we don't sell in our county. We put together trips. We use a few outside deliveries. We actually handle a lot of our own deliveries and logistics, and and we put miles on rigs, and we make fair prices, and we go the extra mile to try to get deals done when there's somebody that wants our cattle. And we view that as a front-loaded investment. So a lot of it isn't quick, and a lot of it isn't necessarily easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. But the other thing that people can do, and I think is really just universally tangible that will help their private treaty sales, is to educate themselves to the point where when there is an interested party, that they can help to sell the benefits of the breed, whether that's the beef, whether that is the beauty, getting over stereotypes that the cattle are crazy and wild and fencing, jumping fences and things like that. I mean, every breed has their bad apples, right? But if they can, be educated to address those things, it tends to help the private treaty sale to be more open to those transactions. And it's like anything, as you grow, you kind of get a routine, and you get, expansion and all those things. But really, it's probably easy enough for most people if they choose to engage in even classifieds, especially with today's cattle market. It's probably relatively easy to turn calves that maybe people are raising for a decent price, and maybe some people don't know that. Maybe don't. I mean, even some non-normal routes for Longhorns. I know some people are taking them into sale yards. We're not right now. We have our own beef outlet, which is what we do. But that utilizing those different sales methods, and there's nothing against sales. We just don't registered sales. We just don't really end up with a lot of fits at the end of the day that we want to consign. So we typically are more active on the buying front. But I think for a lot of people, engaging in multiple fronts of selling the animal is important. And I guess the other thing, and it's hard, and I'm still guilty of this too, I'll just say that up front, but establishing value and pricing cattle is a huge part of selling cattle, particularly private treaty. And what you think it's worth and what it's really worth doesn't really matter. It's always worth what somebody will pay for it. And I know we've all heard that, but it's very true. And if a cow is worth $25,000 to us, I have no problem putting $25,000 on it. If it's worth $1,200, I have no problem putting $1,200 on it. But when you're a new producer and you only have 10, it's hard to give something away for $1,200, and I understand that. There's challenges there, and I've been through them, and I would acknowledge that those exist. That gets better with size and scope expanding, but that's a challenge. And the best way to do that is just to try to price things for what they're worth, or what you feel they're worth rationally, within the industry. I see a lot of people that are high on cattle. They're like, oh, this cow is worth $3,500 because it's out of this bull. Well, that's really nice, and it's a nice bull, but is the data there? Is the color there? Is the horn there? Is it checking all the boxes to be a $3,500, replacement heifer or young cow? And it may be, but when it's not, maybe people are ahead sometimes to, the hardest thing is to move on. It's to move on from particularly female cattle if they don't fit with your operation, and that creates cash flow. And bulls are great, but if you're selling everything as a bull, you're selling too many bulls. Steers are a big part of the deal, and not every male. In fact, most male, offspring should probably go in a different direction than being, just this automatic anointed, oh, he's going to be a herd sire. There are some, pretty strong candidates the second they hit the ground, but there's also a lot that just take time to develop. So I think there's a lot to that question, and it's not an easy answer, but a lot of it's learning the game and learning how to price and how to, a website's huge. Put out a plug for Hired Hand. A website's huge. We had a website before we went to Hired Hand a few years ago, and I do see an uptick having the pedigree linked website. It's huge. It's professional. It's clean. It's valuable. And so I would say when people get to the point where they want to sell private treaty, having an internet presence and letting people find them is also really, really helpful, because you aren't going to talk to everybody. They're going to reach out. You got to find a way to let them find you.
Well, I feel like there was a lot of great advice packed into that answer. So thank you for that. I would like to switch gears and talk about the beef program for a little bit. But before we do that, is there anything else regarding the pedigree herd that we haven't talked about that you want to have our listeners, know, or advice, tips, lessons learned, anything like that we haven't covered?
Oh, I mean, not too much. I would just say reemphasize when you're looking at the pedigreed herd, you need to build the best. People need to try to build the best true foundation herd they can, and it's okay to sell what doesn't fit for you, and it's okay to source them. Not just steer calves or bull calves, but heifers as well. They have a value, even if that value is in a range herd that's maybe not even papered sometimes, especially here out west. Sometimes that will pay the same as a papered heifer sale. And that's early on, that was hard for me to grasp. But when the money was about the same, it was like, well, okay, if these 5 heifers are going to go run in the Southern Oregon desert in a commercial cow herd, that's great. That's kind of what I would say to that. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about the beef herd and your beef sales. Again, I'm going to throw the same question at you as I did with the private treaty question. For folks who are wanting to get started and make that a profitable avenue for their herd, what advice do you have for them?
The first piece of advice I would have would be to get on their state and then the federal USDA website and truly understand the requirements it takes to legally sell beef. There's a lot of people that don't, not in Longhorns, but in beef in general, that are trying to get in, and they just can't. They don't get advice on how to get the right license or this and that and the other, and then they hit a lot of roadblocks, and a lot of people also just want to sell halves and wholes, and then that's fine. I don't mind selling halves and wholes, and we used to sell a lot of them. The main reason why we went away from halves and wholes being our primary market is because there's a lot less people that want to spend, nowadays $1,500 basically to get into a portion of an animal as there are that want to spend $15 to $50 on prepackaged beef. The other thing I like is as we've expanded, we have our labels, we have all those things that allows us to do other products that are really a great fit for Longhorn beef. Being a lean, heart, healthy beef, we have, like pepperoni and summer sausage, things like that are phenomenal fits for the product, and not just trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And while I think a Longhorn steak is good, and it takes a preparation. I think most people who have sold beef would agree it takes some education to cook lean beef, whether it's bison or Longhorn or anything. And when you have people purchasing a large amount of beef, you can end up with kind of an overwhelming factor for those people at times. So halves and wholes are great. We still do some, but I would say to people wanting to get started, understand what you want to do. If the state you're in requires you to be a licensed meat seller like the state of Oregon does for us, make sure you go through that process. And if you want to do retail at any point, you need to locate a USDA facility. And if that's not close to you, you need to find and put together the logistics for that to be incorporated. Now, there are some states where in-state sales can be done with state inspection, and that that's be an option for some folks. And that's why they need to check into it. To my understanding, in most of those cases, that meat shouldn't be crossing state lines, though. So you've got to really figure out that licensure piece and understand that and make sure it's something people want to do. And if they're committed, it's a matter of, obviously people would want to start small, do some test runs, figure out the product, educate the product, eat the product, and figure out what the long-term goals are, size, scope. Do you want to raise 10? Do you want to raise 100? And how many do you want to process, and where are you going to do it? And so those are the big things, is what does it look like out the door? My next piece of advice would be grass-fed versus grain-fed. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a huge health-conscious population following, which is great. And so the vast majority, really all of our steers, are grass-fed and finished because that's what the market demands. As a former ag teacher, I appreciate a fatty corn-fed steak as much as anybody, but it's not a market fit for this breed typically. Now, that there'll be people that say, hey, you can finish them and it'll add fat. Well, it will, but is it going to add value? Maybe it might, but you'll add some pounds perhaps. But I don't, in my experience, in the markets we work in, you won't get the per pound price that we receive for a grass-fed and finished all natural product. It's just a reality of the market. It's not a political thing. It's not a philosophical thing even. It's just a reality of the market, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. And I know as we work into California and, Arizona, the wholesale work we do in Arizona, we see a lot more breadth of variety in terms of what people want down there. Our spiced products do phenomenal down there. The chorizo, and all those things. So that's kind of a next step. But I would say for people, they just need to figure out what they want to do and where they want to sell it and what that looks like, honestly.
And what about the marketing side? I know you've mentioned farmers markets that your fiance does and a few other things, but talk to me a little bit about any marketing advice.
Yeah, so we have a separate beef website. It's linked on our Hired Hand website. We run through a company called Barn to Door. It's an integrated inventory. There's a little bit of marketing there, but I guess it's marketing because once we can get people there, if it's a remote sale, it's shipping, it's all that, it's handled, right? So that's nice there. Elizabeth Good does a phenomenal job. She has a background in sales, so I was lucky there to bring her on board with the company to run those things, and she's doing a great job. It's growing rapidly under her leadership and guidance on that side, which allows me to focus on cattle and hay and other things, which is awesome. And so yeah, we have a local farmers market. We do 2 major rodeos, usually Chief Joseph Days and the Pendleton Roundup each year. At the rodeos, we only do our smoked products. We take a little bit of burger, but that's not really what we're targeting to sell. People want the quick product, the cooked product. And but the market is different. The farmers market is, there's a vast array of folks, right? So we have a lot of tourism in the summer, and then almost nobody this time of year through through the winter, through the early spring. There's not a lot of people around, and then into early fall, there's nobody around. But summer's crazy, right? So a lot of people, everything from people looking at carnivore diets to paleo diets that are big clients to organically, naturally minded folks, back to the land, holistic types that like the nature of the breed. And it fits kind of for all those people in different ways for different reasons. But yeah, the marketing to those different populations varies a little bit in the conversation because those people each want to hear a different part of the truth of the Longhorn, but how it relates to their experience and their goals for the product they want to consume. So beef marketing is much more difficult, and it's much more personal for people than cattle marketing, honestly, because these people these days take pretty serious what they're putting in their body, especially people that are paying a premium price for a premium, health marketed product. So it needs to be backed up, and it needs to be marketing needs to be well educated, well informed, and literature's huge. Brochures, information, websites, store, all those things, displays, and just being there. Having knowledgeable people helping at booths and things like that, taking the time to train them, having nice displays, professional appearance. That's the best thing people can do, whether they just want to start by selling hamburger or they want to sell everything, and being prepared to answer questions about processing and explaining that and how and where it's done and to various levels of whatever the customer's going to want. The customer is very inquisitive these days, more often than not when they're purchasing beef, particularly at the market level. They have a lot of questions, and they want to feel empowered, and that process kind of allows them to do that. And if you're prepared to do that, and you match their expectations and our experience, you're going to get a lot of sales. And there's also the people that go through that are just never going to buy your product, and you need to learn to not take that personal, and you need to learn to just say, okay, have a nice day. The common thing is, so I want my stuff corn fed, and that's fine, that's great, but and I want they really don't want a Longhorn either, and so that's what people always have to be kind of thick skinned and say, have a nice day, and that's a big part of it, because sourcing this product is part of it. And I think some people think you can fit square pegs in round holes, and the breed's phenomenal. We love the breed, but the breed is what the breed is. The breed does certain things better than any other breed, but the breed is also, it's not. You're not going to produce a Wagyu ribeye with a Texas Longhorn. You're not. You're going to produce a heart-healthy, lean ribeye that's still marketable, and you can have some intermuscular marbling and have a really good product. But it's not. You can't start comparing, I guess, is my point with that. Just let it be what it is, and if it's a fit for people, it's a fit for people. And those people will be loyal if they're happy with it, because it's what they're looking for. If they're looking, it's probably what they're looking for. And if you take care of them, they'll continue to purchase it. There's a lot of customer service in Longhorn beef. And, it's not just, hey, here's your burger, have a nice day. There's a lot of follow-up. There's a lot of repeat buyers. There's a lot of people that, when they cook it correctly, are, they're very happy with it. But yeah, I hope that answers the question well. There's just a lot of variables in beef.
Oh, I think there was a lot of great information there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let's talk a little bit about where you're located, the part of the country. So early on in today's podcast, you mentioned, that you have some irrigation systems for some of the land and different things like that. Is there anything else that you find yourself having to do with the size of herd that you have to be sustainable, or, any innovations that you are utilizing that maybe folks further south don't have to or aren't?
We're in the northeast corner of the state of Oregon in Wallowa County, which is on the corner or on the border of Washington and Idaho. Washington's to the north, Idaho to the east. We're right in the corner. We're actually just as close to Missoula, Montana as we are Portland, Oregon to drive. So culturally, we're in a lot of ways more like Eastern. We are like Eastern Washington and Idaho than Western Oregon, for sure, in this area, and then geographically, climate-wise as well. This isn't, the temperate rainforest of the Willamette Valley. This is a big mountain valley area where we're at. We're not sagebrush country. We're outside of that. We're not Southern Oregon when people think of that. It's very cold in the winter, and it gets hot in the summer, but our irrigation, we went to on our main ranches, the 3 main ranches, we went to valley pivots. We've got quite the system now. We've got 4 pivots. One of those is used to manage basically. Some years we'll cut one cutting the grass hay off of it, but it's basically a year-round orchard grass. It's a set of 3, well, really 4 fields, and one is a hay field, and then we use it for cows later. But we use that, and then we use it on alfalfa fields, and then we have some other orchard grass as well as alfalfa down at the other property. So we're producing both those hay varieties for the cattle with our irrigation systems. We went to pivots because of not really for any other reason besides the fact that we produce more hay and more tonnage and more yield. There are some environmental benefits to that as well, but there's some cost share things in Oregon and some other factors that weigh into that. But really, at the end of the day, from a production standpoint, it's a production decision, and that pivot does a lot better than anybody, me included, trying to stay on a schedule perfectly with wheel lines or hand lines or anything like that. It removes a lot of human error from the equation to get a really consistent application of product. We're just coming out of doing that huge project, so 2025 is really our first year with most of that in production of alfalfa. We still have a little bit of replanting to do, but the cattle herd's integral to that process of how we've done it. If we weren't, raising these registered cows, we could just pound everything down in alfalfa and do that differently. But managing different herds with different bulls through the summer, needing space, needing pasture, moving logistics, shipping cattle, obviously calving. That requires pens, that requires space, that requires clean, drain fields in the spring and winter, and it requires grass in the summer. So that's integral to the way we design that and all that. We're fortunate that we have a warm, spring-fed creek in our property year-round that runs right through all 3 of our main ranches. And then down at the other property, there's fresh water as well. So water's not really much of a thing. We are looking at doing a livestock water project for our cattle with an NRCS. Well, it's a company called Wallowa Resources, actually, but they're doing some livestock water projects and pilots. We're looking at maybe putting one in on the driest portion of our properties. It's in a remote, about 30-acre section that we traditionally had to haul water to, and that would be pretty unique. And that's an example of running Longhorn somewhere not only longer than what you can run other cattle, but there's a lot of people that wouldn't even probably attempt to run commercial cattle for very long or at all on some of that ground and terrain. It's very rocky and jagged area, but if we get water there, we've got quite a bit of feed for these cattle because they're browsers. There's no doubt about it. So we rent, like I said earlier, we rent a property on the main highway here and get a lot of exposure that goes back to the marketing as well. People got to see the cows to know about the cows. So, but yeah, there's a lot of innovation. The way we feed, the way we build fence, the way we have our facilities designed, those are some of the biggest questions we have. A 7.5 to 8 foot wide stock trailer and slightly wider alleyways is where you want to start, and then go from there. Yeah, everything's kind of catered around the breed, I guess, because it's what we do. And then we just we try to make decisions accordingly.
Well, one more question I'd like to ask here before we wrap up is just, I'm just curious, you've been an ag teacher for how long? You mentioned you've been involved with livestock, whether it be commercial, pedigree, beef, for almost 20 years. What are your biggest concerns for our livelihood moving forward, our the future in livestock for future breeders?
I mean, if I'm being honest, I think it's a little bit different for agriculture in general than for our breed. I think the novelty And the beauty of the Texas Longhorn is I think it's standalone, maybe, from a visual standpoint, the most marketable breed of cattle there is. I'm slightly biased, but they will sell themselves. So I think the breed at this point, we're not endangered. The breed's not endangered. It'll sustain. The broader picture in terms of the cattle industry is complicated, because I think you're going to see ebbs and flows continue. I mean, it's been that way for quite some time. It's going to ebb and it's going to flow. It's going to go up. It's going to go down, and it's going to be. I mean, it's market based, so that's just how it is. In terms of the trends, I think we're still trending towards less small family farms, which can be troubling in some ways. At the end of the day, though, it's hard for those operations to pencil unless they have external support, whether that's a day job for one or more family members or parts of a couple or extended family or whatever. And honestly, I would say if I were somebody starting new, I would recommend it. If they were starting from scratch, that they had at least one person probably working off the farm. And, that's not in an ideal world how it would have to be, but I think that's probably the reality. If people are trying to truly start and get ahead, that's probably where it should be from a financial standpoint. For people to be able to succeed, particularly with a specialty breed. Yeah, I have concerns about, things get more corporate, things get international and all that, but the reality is, and I always thought as an ag teacher, like, the reality is there's always going to be a fundamental value for protein and food in general, right? Food in general and protein. And, prices, I'm not an economist, but I would assume that we're going to continue to see a rise in the prices, particularly of animal proteins. I mean, eggs included. We see that, right? We've seen that. We see it in beef and lamb and all these other products. But the difference is with this round of inflation, rounds of inflation, there seems to be a different, more advanced, modern response from agriculture from a pricing standpoint. And that's part of it. It's not cheap to produce food of any kind, and it's certainly not cheap to produce animal protein. And that's going to be a driving force. Food, shelter, water. Those are human needs, and those are going to be things that are going to sustain through any situation. At some point, hopefully there's a system in some states, particularly Western states, where there's more emphasis at the state government and whatnot levels to do more to support ranchers and farmers, row crop farmers included, all those involved in agriculture, because for those people that are critical of subsidies and things like that, not to be too direct, but I think they like the subsidies a lot more than they'd like the real price of their food. And it's expensive if it was a real price of what people actually have to put into these operations to make any type of food, whether it's animal based or plant based. But I would say that's my observation / concern is I think we're going to see higher food prices, and I think it's somewhat justified, and I don't think some people are going to like that, but the alternative is agriculture falling behind further and being even more of a gap, right? It's no different than a deficit or anything else. It's got to keep up as well, and people don't like it when it's food or it's it feels personal because everybody needs to eat and everybody needs to have shelter and all those things, but it's complicated. So having multiple outlets for producers is important. I mean, I tell people we sell cattle about 19 different ways, and we sell them at least that many different ways, from live cattle to skulls to beef and this and that and the other, So it helps to feel like you have multiple sources if one angle starts to be weird for a little bit or dry up or have complications with political or government or environmental and things like that are driving up the cost, not just of the affected product, which is, beef for the most part, lamb, of course, but that drives up the cost enormously for agriculture in general because that has a trickle down to transportation and insurance and all these different industries that are affected by having to try to backfill these losses. And then not even to mention the enormous litigation that occurs privately and at the state level in particular. And you get into federal delisting of, and the wolf is one example. There's other predators as well, but it's an extreme example out here. And our county's kind of been on the forefront of that. We're the first county where they came into from the Yellowstone ecosystem back in about 2007, 2008. And there's been hundreds of depredations, mostly commercial cattle, but still, they've killed everything from llamas to mules. And it's just the radical environmental view of protecting a predator that wasn't even in this part of the world is costing people a lot of money. It is the reality, and it's not good for humans, and it's not good for not even just agriculture. You have elk patterns changed. You have, the very small moose population getting decimated. Like the reality is those revisionist policies and about being too harsh, those very progressive worldviews on things like wolves. And other issues, quite frankly, but in our part of the world, like wolves, they're costing millions of dollars that are just unseen costs, and there's no way to recoup them, unfortunately, other than the cost of product, and even that isn't even making it up at this point. So we're on the outside of that. I saw more of it, heard more of it as an ag teacher and people I know that directly dealing with our cattle where we run them. But they're not far from us. Like I said, we lost one calf years ago, but I know people that have lost over 100, and that's not even the ones that they don't know about. Things like that are really what concern me because there's still a large portion of the population that refuses to be educated or find middle ground on issues like that. Not just that issue, if that makes sense, but issues like that. It's expensive, and it's upsetting to both sides for different reasons, but it's expensive. It's incredibly expensive, and the consumer pays the price along with the rancher, and it's a steep price to pay. So, not to end on a negative note, but that's those are some of the concerns I have. But I think people wanting to be in agriculture, it's kind of like anything. When there's going to be a demand, there's going to be a demand for food. There's going to be a demand for livestock and also the inherent values of the lifestyle. So I would still encourage people to do it, just to do it with a very, very targeted plan right now, at this point in time.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and advice with us today. I really appreciate it. And we'll be sure to direct folks to your Hired Hand website where they can get more information on anything that they're interested in, or if they'd like to contact you directly.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on From the Pasture with Hired Hand. We hope you enjoyed this visit to Oregon to Rocking M Cattle Company and learned something new about the various ways that you can market and breed Texas Longhorns for profitability. If you like today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. You can always explore more stories from the pasture by visiting our website or following us on social media. Until next time, remember to appreciate the pastures you roam and the traditions that make them special.